Okay, so let's talk about making a knot. Now, I have a little piece of black paper down so you can see things a little bit more easily. We're going to start off with these big plastic weaving needles and some big pieces of yarn to start off by talking about how to tie the knot and to thread your needle. And then once we've practiced with these, then we'll move over to our real needle, which is made out of metal. And our real thread, which you'll see is really, really, really thin. So we'll get to this one in a second. First off, we're going to talk about this one. So on every needle, there are two parts. There's obviously the point to your needle and the eye of your needle, and the eye of your needle is where you actually thread it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece of yarn and my needle, and there we go. And let's talk about how to thread this thing. So a lot of the times I have my students who hold their yarn way back here and then they're trying to shove this into the eye of the needle and it's not working. What you want to do is you want to get that thread all the way up into the absolute closest to your fingers it can possibly get, because what you're going to do is take that and literally push it right through the eye of the needle, and then you can pull it right on out. So I'm going to show you that one more time. Ready? All the way up to the very, very, very end of the thread. Push it right through the eye of the needle and then pull. And then what you wind up with is basically like a needle necklace almost. So once you've got your needle threaded, you can pause here if you want to take a second to complete that step. Your next step is to then get your hands on both ends of your thread. It's okay if your needle's just hanging. Both ends of your thread, and you're going to bring them together into your two pincher fingers. Now notice, I am a right-handed person, so I put these in my left hand because then I can use my right hand to actually twist it around. So that's helpful for me. So I'm just pinching it between my thumb and my pointer finger, have my two ends hanging here, and now we're actually going to use this to tie a knot. So let's talk about how to do this knot tying. So I'm going to take these two ends and I'm going to loosely wrap it around my pointer finger, and I'm just going to let my thumb catch them. So you'll see that I have these two sort of little rabbit ears hanging off here, pinched around my pointer finger. I don't want this to be really tight because I want to be able to slide it off. They're all pinched in between my two fingers. If I slide this little loop off here, you can see it kind of makes a little letter P with two antennae. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two ends and I'm going to push them through this loop that I made. So I'm just going to push them right through the loop, and then I can pull, and you'll see now that that gives me a knot. Now, because this thread is so thin, we're going to need to do at least a double knot, if not a triple knot. So if you notice that when you're sewing, your thread pulls right through your fabric, that tells you that your knot is not big enough and it's not catching it before it pulls all the way through. So let's do a double knot. So again, I'm going to hold on to it with my pointer finger. My first knot is right here. I'm going to wrap it around my finger nice and loose. Slide that off my finger so I can see that little loop that I made. Push those ends through the loop. Now this is important. Ready? So my first knot is right here, and I need my new knot to land right on top of my first knot. So when I'm pulling, I'm being careful to make sure that they're landing about the same place, because now I have a knot that is twice as big. I have a double knot. I'm going to do that one more time for triple knot. Loop it around. There's my P. Push it through and pull. See how they're going to land right on top of that old knot? Now I've got a nice big knot that's going to keep my thread from pulling through my fabric. So that was practicing with the big ones. Let's move on to the small ones. So this is the real deal. This is the actual stuff you're going to be using. So I have my piece of thread, which you're going to get to choose whichever color you want. And I'm realizing that as I pick this up, I put a little bit of a knot in it. That's okay, because it's just a little bit right here. So I'm going to try and pull it out. Sometimes if you just give it a good tug, it'll come out. Or I can also just snip that off, and that's not a big deal either. So I've got my piece of thread. I have my metal needle. It's exactly the same as my sewing needle, except this one's thinner, has a little bit of a smaller eye, and it's a little bit pointier. So we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take my end of my thread, I'm going to get it all the way up in between my fingers. I'm going to push it through the eye of my needle and then pull it out the other side. So now I have my thread necklace. And you'll notice this piece is a lot bigger because you have a lot to sew, right? So now that my needle is threaded, I'm going to take my two ends, which I have in both of my hands. I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I just practiced with my yarn. So let's just let my needle hang. I'm going to hold this between my two fingers, wrap it around my finger, pull off my little loop, and then push it through the loop and give it a pull. You want to make sure to keep your knot as close to the end as you can because you don't want to waste a bunch of fabric that gets, or a bunch of thread. So now I made my first itty bitty little knot because my thread is so small. I need to make it bigger. So I'm going to put it in my fingers again, one more time, wrap it around, push it through the loop. And now as I'm pulling, I want to make sure that I'm guiding my fabric so it lands on top of my old knot. Cool? I'm going to do that one more time, loop it around, push it through the loop, and see how I'm pulling it and making sure that it lands on top of my old knot. So now I've got a little bit of a bigger knot, and now I'm all ready to sew.